Welcome to the Cuse Conversations podcast from Syracuse University. I'm Chris Velarde. Today we've got a powerful, emotional conversation with 2012 Newhouse grad Erika Mahoney. Erika is the host of her own very personal new podcast, Senseless, where she shares the story of her journey through trauma, grief, and resilience after her father was killed in a mass shooting at a Colorado grocery store in 2021.
The day my dad died, part of me died too, including, my identity.
As a daughter, Erika wanted to share her father's story, her family's story, her story. She wanted to take a closer look at the pain she and her community were experiencing, the questions they were asking, and the connections that were helping them heal. As a journalist, though, she felt conflicted, and I'll let her pick it up from there.
I found myself on the other side of the story. My email inbox was filling up with all of these interview requests, and it was tough because I was honestly torn on whether I should speak out or not. But here I was, a journalist. I was news director of the NPR station in Monterey, California at the time. And I had spent a decade asking people to share their hard stories with me. And so I said yes to doing interviews. And I wanted to because I wanted to show the world that my dad was a human being who shouldn't have had to run for his life in a grocery store parking lot. And in talking, it felt very purposeful. And now 4 years later, after a lot of work on myself and, moving through grief and trauma and trying to find joy again, I'm raising my voice even more through this podcast. And it feels really, really good.
Yeah, you mentioned in the email you sent that you're proud and you should be proud, obviously, because this is such an important thing for you personally, but an important thing on a bigger level, obviously.
Yeah.
This is, right?
Yeah.
This is a thing that every time it happens, we say, how can it happen here? How can it happen again? Yet it keeps happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really, it made me smile when I wrote the email and I said, I'm really proud of this project. And you wrote back and you pointed out the word proud. I've never used that word before. I'm very much like typically a wallflower, but I really do feel proud of my podcast Senseless. And more than that, too, just proud of myself for getting back up after this. And I'm trying not to cry. You're making me cry. But yeah, it's really the first time I've used the word proud. And I think that we should be able to use the word proud when we've done something that, it feels aligned with our soul.
There have been, I'm certain, through this process and will continue to be long after this process is over, so many emotions that you've experienced.
Yeah.
And to retell this story.
Yeah.
What has that been like for you and how have you been able to manage that?
It's been hard. There were definitely some low points where I wanted to give up and just say, like, this is too much and to quit. But really what gave me the strength were all the people that I interviewed on the show. I'll never forget my very first interview was with a young woman named Olivia McKenzie, and she lost her mom in the shooting. And I met her on a hillside overlooking Boulder. And the conversation we had, I think we talked for like 2 hours. So there was a lot of editing in that, as you know, but it lit this fire in me because her story of grief was so amazing to me and how she was able to put the pieces of her life back together and get back up. And I just felt like the world needs these stories. I want to share these stories. My whole career has prepared me to do this. And so I continued on one foot in front of the other. I mean, making a podcast is not easy in of itself, but this subject matter is really tough. And it was emotional to I lived this from my perspective of loss and losing someone to gun violence. But I also interviewed shoppers who survived. And so that was really humbling and eye-opening to hear their story.
Yeah, I mean, the theme of one of the episodes I listened to while mowing the lawn is connections. We're all connected.
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
that, right, and that really in different places in different ways, but discovering some of those connections must have been really interesting. I
Yes.
don't know if that's the right
No,
word.
no, it is. It's really fascinating. I think that my editor came up with this phrase. It's called web of pain. And we use that in the podcast because it's so true. I mean, it's so interesting to see all of these connections, not only within the tragedy in Boulder, but beyond. So, for example, the Aurora movie theater mass shooting, one of the young women she was killed, Jessica Gowie, she was one of my mom's students. And I think the thing about mass shootings is that they cause an outsized impact. So you think about my dad and all the other shoppers were there. You think about all the employees who were there. You think about all of the first responders who showed up. I call them helpers, the therapists and everyone that comes in to help. And then you multiply that by all of these incidents happening in the US. And there's just some really, I mean, honestly, I was at this event yesterday and it was at a high school where I was learning about some new technology called Campus Guardian Angel that's looking to add a layer of safety to schools in the face of this. And the security guard comes up to me and he goes, I was at King Soopers, the grocery store where it happened, 30 minutes before the shooting unfolded. And at the time I was working for a security company where they bring in the money. And just to meet him because he has lived with he wishes that he had been there because he could have stopped something. And I gave him a big hug and I said, "You're here now. And thank you for sharing my story." And I got his number and his email. I mean, so yes, we are all connected. I see it every day.
As you've gone through this process, as you've talked to people, are there any things that have come out of the conversations you've had, the stories you've been able to share and had shared with you that have surprised you? Is there anything that's kind of that maybe was unexpected in a way,
Yes.
kind of even beyond?
Yes. Right now I'm thinking about episode 3, which just came out. And the ending is about a love story that rose from the ashes of this. So we hear from Logan, and Logan worked at the store and survived. And not only did he survive, he helped people out the door and get to safety. And he eventually crossed paths with Olivia, who I spoke about, my very first interviewee, and they fell in love and they helped each other process their grief and trauma. And I mean, wow. you know, so often we talk about, the hard parts of grief, and it's so hard, but there are also some beautiful things to come out of it. And I think I would give it all back to have my dad back. But, for me, I've learned to, like I said, slow down, live boldly, raise my voice. I think life is so much shorter than we really think it is, and life is fragile. Every day is really a gift. So I've taken that to heart just in how I lead my life.
And you talk about kind of the parts of life and life being shorter, and you've got a child. You were pregnant when this happened, and
Yeah.
right, and that kind of
Yeah.
that must have been just
It,
a huge part of the struggle of it, of the
yeah,
loss, but also the impending birth.
totally. I was 6 months pregnant with my baby girl. And so she's about the same age as the shooting, which is a little bit tough. And this is coming out in episode 4. But I actually checked in to the hospital to deliver her on Father's Day, the first Father's Day after losing my dad. And I really wanted her to come on Father's Day because I felt like it would just mask the pain that this holiday would forever hold. And she came the next day, which happened to be the summer solstice. And now that I'm in a better place, I really like that she has her own day and that I can honor my dad and honor her. So it was really hard. I think it was really hard to become a parent while losing a parent. I remember sobbing so much in the hospital room and thinking, How am I going to protect her in a world that didn't protect my dad?
Mm.
And so I think to answer, going back to one of the first questions you had, that's been a driving force of this is how can I open eyes to the pain that this American tragedy causes in hopes of some sort of change and trying to protect my family and my kids, but also just, these younger generations who are really being traumatized by this.
Yeah. As you listen to the podcast, your journalism training and journalism skills are on full display. You're a storyteller. You are basing everything you're talking about in the facts and the narrative of what happened. You're adding, the stories and the human part of it all. But yet this is also something that very much happened to you. How, as you approach this, do you balance those two things?
Oh, it's been a journey. And I really like this question because the day my dad died, part of me died too, including, my identity. And for me, it was tough because rightly so, journalists have parameters around what we can and can't say. And, we're not supposed to go to protests or wear, t-shirts with like a cause on it, because that matters and we need to remain objective. But for me, it was like, wow, like this happened to me and it would be disingenuous to pretend that it didn't happen to me. And I never expected to be telling my own story, but here we are. And so I think what's been kind of just what the universe has handed me is stepping into the podcasting sphere has allowed me to more freely express my opinions, be my authentic self, and just be my whole self. So that's been really, really wonderful. And it's definitely a continuation of all the skills that I learned in journalism. And so I kind of just see this as like a branching off point almost. And I'm not quite sure what the future holds, but all of the skills of journalism, the fact checking, the storytelling, like that's all in there. And at the same time, I'm just being totally vulnerable and raw and myself.
Yeah, the idea of using those skills and applying them in this way, are there times that some of those lessons you may have learned as a student at Newhouse are in your head saying, "Oh, all right, I've got to do this. I've got to take this approach to this." And does it help shape kind of your style?
Newhouse has been fundamental in my career as a TV reporter and then as a radio reporter and now as a podcaster. I just have professors comment still in the back of my head. They're still there. Those one-liners that'll stay with you, like never end an interview without asking, is there anything else you want to add? Because that is actually a question that will give you surprises. And the technical aspects as well, things that I learned just to edit. And absolutely set me up for this project.
And diving into this podcasting space, which obviously is huge, right? There are a lot of voices out there in the podcasting world. But what it offers you as a reporter who had to do stories in a pretty limited amount of time. Are you enjoying that aspect of storytelling, of being able to dive a little deeper?
It was like an adjustment because, I was like a daily news reporter for so long. So you have like a day to do a story.
A day to do a story and a minute 20 to do it.
Right. Exactly. So there's that fast-paced nature, and that's really fun and exciting. And I think for me, I had to learn to be more patient in the podcasting sphere. Things just were, it's just a slower beat to this. And that's been wonderful. But when you look at a 30-minute story, which is how long each episode of my podcast, 30-ish, you can just go so deep with the subject and really dive in. And that's been so amazing. I mean, right before I started the podcast, I was, reporting for NPR, and like you would maybe it's even longer than TV. You'd get 4 minutes. But going from a 4-minute story to a 30-minute story, even just looking at the script on my computer, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm getting lost in the script. And I did end up hiring some people to edit those like longer main episodes. only because like it's just to have that help, and forming a team has been really great. And there's a lot of things I'm doing, and so to have an editor, like a technical editor, has been really helpful.
Well, because you are so close to this story,
Mhm.
I was wondering if there were other people who you're leaning on to just kind of check you once in a
Yes.
while.
So this was like a sign from the universe, but how this all started was me going to Best Buy, buying my own recorder. And I was just thinking about that day not too long ago, meeting Olivia and then continuing and just getting all of this audio. And then out of the blue, my former news director at the NPR station in Monterey where I worked, she was the one who hired me. She says, I have a little bit of time. Can I help you with your project? And I was like, please. And so Krista Almanzon is my editor. And I think that editing is so important. And it's so important to have an outside voice. And she's walked, with me throughout this journey, but she's able to have that space and that separation that you need, where it's like, everyone needs an editor. So in this process, I formed my own team, Erika Mahoney, LLC. I trademarked the name. I hired an editor. I got a composer. There's all these like little moving parts. And actually, I think I want to maybe hold some workshops on how to do a podcast and start a podcast, because I felt like I was really diving into something that I didn't know. Even the lingo is different between the radio TV world. Like
Yeah.
one of the first things I learned was chatcast is what you call like a two-way, right? So I've always known that as a two-way.
Yep.
And my podcast isn't a chatcast, it's a narrative, but yeah, there was a learning curve, and I feel like I would love to share what I've learned with people. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think there is value in understanding it, and good for you for kind of diving in and figuring out as you went along.
It was that. It was that.
But sometimes you have to do that as well. You have to,
I think
to
so.
take that leap.
Yeah, it's a leap. You've got to take a risk. And, what happened to my dad and to my family was such a life-changing thing that I wanted to take this leap. And it's been so wonderful. So I'm glad I did.
As listeners follow you on this journey through this podcast, what are you hoping they take away from the stories you're sharing?
Multiple takeaways. So with this story, I'm really asking people to walk with me from the day of the shooting through the trial and the years in between when I'm grappling with grief and trauma. And these are things that, the human stories behind the headlines. And so what I hope people take away is that, this American tragedy causes immense pain, and just opening eyes to the toll that they take. Actually, in 2023, I wrote an essay for The Atlantic talking about that, talking about how so often we focus on the number of victims in a mass shooting, but really this impacts so much, farther beyond that. So that's my first takeaway. My second takeaway is the main takeaway, and that is moving forward after the unthinkable, which is like the tagline of my show. We live in a really scary, chaotic world. There's a lot of uncertainty, and I hope that this podcast is a safe place for people to come and know that we can get on the other side of these hard things, that we can find joy again, and that one way of healing and processing and moving forward is showing up for each other. And I've learned now, so many people showed up for me, and now I'm returning the favor. And I hope that that's a takeaway. In episode 1, I talk about this woman who walked out of the store with my dad and made him laugh in his final moments. So now I'm the person in the grocery store smiling probably like a crazy person, just because you never know how much a smile can really mean. And there's little things that we can do in our daily lives to make us feel in a world that feels very out of control, more in control. We have a lot more agency than we think.
Yeah. And those are moments when you know you're making that difference if you smile at someone in the grocery store. And with a podcast like this, you may be making that difference on people that you may never get a chance to meet. That's a powerful thing.
I'm so glad you said that. I had this vision the other day. I was just kind of pondering, and I was imagining someone with headphones on listening to my podcast, and it just warmed my heart because I've gotten a lot of people writing me saying this is helping me so much. People who maybe lost someone to cancer. I mean, you don't have to be affected by a mass shooting for this to resonate with you. And to just know that there's people out in the world listening to this and it's resonating with them and helping them is why I did it in the first place, and makes every second of hard work so worth it.
I told you this was a powerful conversation. You can find Erika's podcast, Senseless, from Lemonada Media on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and all the usual places. Our thanks to Erika Mahoney for joining us and sharing her story. And thanks to you for listening to this Cuse Conversation. I'm Chris Velarde.